Welcome back, everyone, to our weekly politics discussion here at the Journal Sentinel. I'm Greg Borowski, our projects editor and editor of PolitiFact Wisconsin. Now, we missed last week, and I can assure you it was entirely coincidental that it was the first day of the NCAA tournament that we missed. I can also assure you it was entirely coincidental that we had lunch that day at Major Goolsby's. But we're back, and there's a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. First, let me start with Dan and a question about the governor's time in New Hampshire and South Carolina. Can you talk about what he did there?
Sure. He was visiting with a number of Republicans and in New Hampshire and in South Carolina. What interests me is what he's trying to do. He's not introduced to a number of these people, so he's trying to tell them who he is. And in New Hampshire, started off with a number of questions about his contradictions, whether he had flip-flopped on immigration, whether he had flip-flopped on ethanol and so forth. And much of his time there was answering those questions, in which he acknowledged reversing direction on immigration, but not on much else. And in South Carolina, he spent a lot of time trying to say who he was in a positive way. Patrick Marley did a story on how he was trying to present himself as a regular guy, that he buys stuff at Kohl's, that he does a number of things like other people, that he doesn't have a college degree, et cetera, et cetera. And he also is trying to present the idea that he can reach across and get the support of all Republicans. And independents, which, that one's a little bit trickier for him because here he's been a very polarizing character, but elsewhere he's trying to present the fact that in the recall election, 1 out of every 6 voters was an Obama supporter as well. But obviously there were unique and interesting things going on in that election. So in New Hampshire and South Carolina, you're seeing him and his campaign team try to say who exactly he is and how they want the voters to think about him.
All right, let me ask, I forgot to introduce at the beginning, we'll do a more formal introduction in a minute. Mary Spicuzza is our other guest today, but what was your take on the governor's performance in 2 very early and very critical states?
Yeah, it seemed like he really is quite good at tailoring his message. Like Dan said, in New Hampshire, he talked a lot about how he doesn't think a conservative has to compromise their principles, and he tried to present himself as someone who hasn't compromised his principles. Obviously, he's been accused of flip-flopping on a number of issues. So
and he has flip-flopped on a number of issues.
Right.
Yeah, let's be honest, when you go from here to here, it's a flip-flop.
Right, yes.
Well, but it's the regional, he has interests as a state where ethanol is not a big thing here, but when you go to Iowa, it is a big thing. So he changes his position there. Immigration, not a big deal here, but in Texas, where he's going to be this weekend, it is a big deal. So yeah, that's something he's got to deal with. And he's only acknowledged flip-flopping on one issue so far.
Immigration
right,
is the one where he said, I've changed my mind and don't support amnesty anymore. And the other ones he said it wasn't a flip-flop, but I think most people call it a flip-flop. I don't know what else you call it.
So how's he tailored his message for South Carolina?
Well, I noticed in South Carolina he talked about how barbecue and how he and his wife Tonette met at Saz's barbecue joint. Yeah. He's very good at kind of the folksy, regular guy. You want to have a line in Kugels with me.
And he is sort of a regular guy. He's probably of the people running right now. I would guess he's probably the poorest guy running for office, wouldn't you say?
He did get his $1 sweater at Kohl's, which was one of the takeaways from his New Hampshire visit. But he certainly is presenting himself that way.
And he tells the Kohl's story about buying a suit, overpaying for it at Kohl's. But the last time,
practically, by the time he's done with his Kohl's cash and his discounts and his coupons, they're practically paying him to take the sweater.
The last time I saw him, I pointed out that he was wearing a suit that didn't look like it came from Kohl's, and he wouldn't tell me where it's from. It looks like he's done sort of an upgrade on his outfit, as well as a number of other changes. The New York Times did a story pointing out that he's changing the way he's saying certain words so it's less flat and nasally. It's not quite a Mark Green overhaul. Mark had the hair redone, his outfit redone, and the way he spoke redone, but it does seem like there are changes, and you have to do that. You don't want to appear as just a regional candidate.
Well, let's take a brief interlude here and just introduce Mary Spicuzza. She's probably familiar to many who follow Wisconsin politics from her previous role at the Wisconsin State Journal. She's joined us just a few weeks ago. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you've been covering and will be covering, and then we'll get back to some of the reader questions.
I'm actually from Milwaukee, so my dad was a big Journal fan, and so I grew up reading the paper and then had reported all around the country, came back to cover state politics here in 2009 when things were a little quieter, and really since 2011, probably around February 11th of 2011. It's been pretty busy for me. And so I've been really covering politics, state government, the campaigns, and now I'm doing that along with breaking news and covering crime and everything else I can help out on. So it's been nice to cover
just
a lot
about
of the same people.
everything.
Yes.
Well, you're writing today about the trooper shooting.
Right, yeah. It's a really sad situation, honestly.
All right, well, we're glad to have you and your expertise, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank
Let's
you.
shift into a reader question. This is from a reader who identified himself as Brian, and it's right on point, I think, with the governor's traveling. He says, why has Scott Walker spent so little time in Wisconsin actually governing instead of being paid to campaign for his bid for president? We know why he's doing it, because he's in his bid for president, but what's the fallout here? Do people start
Well,
to worry?
his numbers aren't great here, and before he ran, people said that they were not enthusiastic about this. But what's interesting to me is, one, where is he at the time of the shooting that Mary was writing about and everybody's talking about? I mean, it's a state trooper, first time a state trooper's been shot and killed in more than 40 years. If that happened in Milwaukee, Chief Flynn would be there on the scene, the mayor would be on the scene. If it happened in the county, David Clark would be there. But this happens and we get nothing more than just a statement from the governor's office. And will he attend the funeral? We don't know. I mean, it's to me a little bit embarrassing that he's not present and front and center on this. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he should be here or not?
You know, and I don't know for a fact that he won't be here for the funeral. We haven't heard when the arrangements are yet.
Right.
The family hasn't announced that, and they've asked for privacy, so I haven't been hounding them, but we're certainly trying to keep
But
up
he was
on
in
that.
Arizona yesterday.
He was in Arizona yesterday speaking at a luncheon, and I don't actually know where he is today because I've been on the trooper duty. So
He's going to be in Texas this weekend,
Yes,
so he's around
so-
a number of places. But you know, the more I think about it, it seems to me that we've traded one governor maybe for two, with Robin Voss and Fitzgerald, Senator Fitzgerald stepping in, and they're the ones who are making all of the news about the budget today, about senior care, previously about the Bucks Arena. I mean, they're the ones who are driving what's going to happen in that legislation. The governor's become more reactive, and will continue to be reactive, I'm guessing, as this continues.
Well, when does this discussion around the governor's time out of state move from being a curiosity to being a real problem for him in terms of things that are missed or that don't go his way, or that people start going, hey, wait a minute, you know, you should be here. You're governor of our state. You know, not.
I think, you know, like anything, it'd be if they screw up something big time. That's when it'll become a big issue. But you know, you're supposed to head that off. So the question is, should they be here now? Christian Schneider, who was here a couple of weeks ago, wrote a column today saying this is no big deal, and I think he's 100% wrong. I think it is a big deal. The governor has shown problems in the past with staff members and vetting them adequately. I think there are questions as to whether his team is up to running things while he's gone, and it also raises questions about our lieutenant governor, what role she'll have while he's not around. So I think it's a legitimate question. It's something that we should be discussing right now.
And we did see in a lot of the polls, even before he, you know, not that he's gotten in the race, but before the talk heated up, a lot of people, it seemed like even Republicans wanted Paul Ryan to run and not Governor Walker. And obviously, Paul Ryan is not running, and Governor Walker seems to be very interested in running.
And it's very easy. It would be very easy for Paul to run because as a member of Congress, you have large breaks and you're not in an executive position. Whereas with Walker, there's stuff every day that's going on. And he's pointed out that he was at the White House and carrying on conversations with Robin Voss about various budget matters, but it's still a different thing. There's the concrete issues, but there's also the symbolic importance of having a governor at various events, or at least.
Right. Well, it seems that's one differentiation, I guess, of if he misses the trooper funeral, for instance. You have to be physically present for that. A lot of stuff can happen. Phone calls, conversations, your aides, and so forth.
But at the same time, it's true that people don't know him nationally, and that's why he gets asked these gotcha questions that he hates. That's because where is he on an issue like abortion? Or the issue I'm interested in right now, he's not been asked his position on global warming as far as I can tell. And recent polls have shown that his support, there was a PPP poll in which only 2% of his supporters said that they believe in global warming. I'll be interested in knowing how he deals with that issue And you know, people here would be interested, but I'm sure people nationally will be interested in knowing what his position is on that.
Well, we have a question that actually just came in from a guy, handle of Gary Cat. Asks, if Walker decides to run for president, do you think it would be a good idea for him to step down as governor?
Yeah.
I think Governor Walker would think that is not a good idea.
I'm sure he wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, it would almost be unprecedented, right? I mean, there's a lot of sitting governors and sitting senators and everybody who run for national office.
Right. And just about every governor who does it, it becomes an issue, whether it's Governor Palin or
Governor Christie, there was talk of that he should step down if Chris Christie runs.
yeah. So I mean, it's an issue, but I don't think it's up to us to tell him how to do it. I just think it's an issue that they've got to figure out some sort of balance on. And you know, he's packed his schedule. It's incredible how many visits, and you
It's
know,
hard to keep up with where he is.
but you know, he is that way when he ran for governor here. He's just moved and shifted into campaign mode. I mean, that's the thing he loves. I mean, the issues that I think he cares about, one, how he's presented in the media, and two, he loves campaigning. I think he probably loves campaigning more than he does running whatever agency or state that he's in charge of. But he's probably doing more events than just about anybody now. I don't see Jeb doing as many events, well, I mean, obviously Ted Cruz now, having gotten into the race, will be doing it, but that's about the only person I can think of.
Well, let me ask a couple questions on, share one reader's note and then ask a question on the broader presidential race. This note is from Packerbacker, who just noted, how cool would it be to have a cheese head in the White House? And I'm assuming he means Walker, not a literal cheese head, which someone probably gave to Obama along the way. But the real question here is on Ted Cruz, who you just mentioned. This is from Mitch in EC. It says, will Ted Cruz be able to make Scott Walker look moderate?
I don't think anyone's going to make him look moderate, but I think
Moderate-er?
Well, I think he'll look. I mean, that Ted will take a position to the right of him. Don't you think?
I saw some Dem comments saying, "Oh, great! You know, people are excited. Ted Cruz is in the race, but now he's going to make Scott Walker look moderate and very, you know, middle of the road." And so they were kind of saying like they wanted to put Scott Walker in that category, and if Ted Cruz was out,
if Tom Cruise gets in, that's going to change everything.
yes, that
Our
would be
ratings
loud
go
too.
through the roof too, I must say.
And we're
so.
saying, no, if Ted Cruz gets in the race, that he's going to make Scott Walker look very, you know, middle of the road.
So you know, so there's these different blocks of voters in the Republican Party, and one is the evangelical vote. And right now, there are 4 people. There are going to be likely 4 people vying for that. That's Huckabee, Cruz, Carson, and Walker. And early on, people thought it was going to be just Cruz and Huckabee, but recent polls have shown Walker slightly ahead. He got like 18% of the evangelical vote. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, and which all 4 of them are not going to get that support. And there's a New York Times story today about the religious right trying to find a candidate who's an alternative to Jeb Bush. So that's the issue. Which of these 4 will end up emerging, or which 2 at best will emerge as the candidate who has the support of the social conservatives? And you know, Walker is doing a number of things to try to appeal, but Ted Cruz is going to be there. And the head of the Faith and Freedom Coalition told me just yesterday that anytime Ted Cruz says something, people are very excited. And when they hear Huckabee's coming to an event, the numbers spike. And with Walker, he seems to have galvanized them as much as anybody else. So, I mean, that's something to look at going forward.
Isn't there one school of thought in this that Walker doesn't have to be the top choice of any of these groups? He can just be the second choice if the presumption is Ted Cruz doesn't have the staying power to make it, or these others, that he just
But he would
has
have
to be conservative enough for them?
Yeah, that would mean he'd have to be the second choice for the establishment, which he's trying to do too. And I think you're probably right that he's trying to be a top tier candidate with the establishment, with the Tea Party group, and with the religious right. Okay. But he could, I think it's a potential. He does resonate. When he talks, people think he comes across as a genuine evangelical. I mean, that's what he's grown up in a Baptist church. So I think those things do, I think it does. There is the potential that he could finish on top in that. The only thing is, Huckabee's numbers are just crazy in terms of how much support he gets from the religious right.
I still think of Walker's reception at the RNC in 2012 in Tampa, and when he got up just to introduce the delegates in the beginning, it was like the Beatles had walked on stage. Like it was this just roar from the crowd with a standing ovation, and I feel like there is like a certain amount of the base that he's just they just love him in some.
What do you think the establishment thinks of him?
I mean, he doesn't have the name recognition of Jeb Bush, but he also hasn't. I feel like there are a lot of conservatives who feel like he's, more conservative and more will stand up for their issues than Jeb Bush will.
I
So,
think
don't know.
I
What
think
do you
they're
think?
trying to make the case that he is. The campaign obviously was behind a story in the USA Today about his fundraising ability and how he's been raising money with the big donors all around the country. And he's obviously gone to a lot of the Koch brothers events, and I think that's to make the case that the conservative establishment should be comfortable with him. But in terms of the issues that he's pursuing, the issues are he's moving further and further to the right to work. He was here, he's now moved over here. On foreign
Immigration.
policy issues, immigration, foreign policy issues, he's trying to present himself as a hawk. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between I'm just a regular, I'm a Republican who can appeal to all Republicans, but the message has been to move further and further to the right, still to the left of Ted Cruz and maybe Tom Cruise, but
We don't know where he
Talking about
stands.
Tom Cruise.
But we're hoping to get him on this show.
are we?
Sit in my chair.
But if Ben Carson gets in, he'll probably be slightly to the left of him as well. But that group is still over there on the issues as being the people who are trying to appeal to the right, to the Tea Party people, and Rand Paul's obviously going to appeal to the Tea Party group that on a number of these issues as well.
He did get some criticism from conservatives recently over firing Liz Mayer, his social media expert, who had tweeted some critical things about Iowa. And it was interesting because it seems like she is actually quite popular and has a pretty good fan base among conservatives. And so when she was, I guess, resigned after her tweets came out, he got some criticism from conservatives who were saying, like, well, he says he's unintimidated, but he's intimidated by Iowa or intimidated by the Iowa caucus. So that was interesting. I didn't.
And the argument's a tough argument for him. There are two options. Either they knew about these tweets and didn't do anything about them until they became public. And the tweets were basically very critical of Iowa being the first state and the one that helped choose a disproportionate level of power in choosing who the Republican nominee is. Either they knew about these things, they vetted her, knew about them, and decided it wasn't an issue until it became an issue, or they didn't know about it, which has been a running theme throughout the.
Right.
Throughout
yeah,
the.
I mean, talk about that a little bit. I mean, what does it say? I mean, I think one of the
These weren't
ongoing
from years ago.
criticisms,
These were
right?
from like
These
January.
are pretty recent stuff, and so someone
And-
should
and
be
some
reading
of-
that, right? If you're hiring this person to be your social media
How many
coordinator.
times has this happened with him? It's happened for people in the administration, it's happened for people with the campaign, and his response has been, in all instances but one that I can think of, and that was with his previous spokeswoman, Allie Murray, where he kept her. But with most of the others, he's thrown them under the campaign bus, just like he did with Liz Mayer. So, and his explanation was slightly different, though. It wasn't that we didn't vet her. It is that we don't want people on our staff who disrespect voters. And
The tone, the tone, not her opinions, that they said they're welcome to have different opinions on staff, but it's the tone of respecting voters. That's
So
what
the
they
whole
said.
Walker team has changed. We don't hear anything about R.J. Johnson anymore. We don't hear very much about Keith Jilks. Those people are gone. But the new team seem to have made the same mistake that Walker has made in the past, which is not fully vetting someone that has an important position within the administration. And it is interesting because this criticism came from the Des Moines paper recognizing it, and who else came across the tweets?
I know that, Liz Mayer said, I know where this came from. This was opposition research, but it was
From
reported.
another Republican campaign probably turned this up quickly. So it's, when he's running for governor here, other Republicans are not are not doing research on him. Usually it's people on the left. So this is a case where he's up against somebody that he wouldn't normally be doing this sort of, opposition research on him.
That kind of, another question of opposition research was that $1.5 million contribution from Menards to Wisconsin Club for Growth. And I guess the question is, wouldn't a Dem if a Dem leaked that, wouldn't a Democrat have leaked that during the 2014 campaign when they wanted Mary Burke to win? And if it wasn't, was it maybe a Republican, maybe a primary challenger? Who knows? But
And right now, we have no idea how Michael Isikoff got those records. And there's been these rumblings that there are a number of stories like this where private interest gave money to Wisconsin Club for Growth, which then turned around and helped Walker, and how much Walker knew of this, because in emails we've gotten, we know that he was directing people to give money to Wisconsin Club for Growth if they had maxed out to him. And obviously Menards has a great deal of interest in its dealings with the state. So it's an interesting and relevant issue. There's nothing illegal about it as far as I know, and no one has prosecuted or done anything, but it's one of those things that most people on the right say they don't want more regulation of speech, they just want disclosure. But as soon as they get disclosure on this, the argument switched from disclosure to is it legal or illegal?
Well, this is a good spot for a question from a reader, and then we'll keep talking about it. But the reader this is reader just wondering, and the first part of the question is rhetorical, I believe. It says, "Is there no shame left in politics?" So we'll get to the rest of the question. Walker's campaign gets.
She'll say no, and I'll say
no,
yes.
yes. Well, we can debate that later. Is there shame or no shame?
Mary, you.
Generally, no shame. Occasionally, shame. Walker's campaign gets the $1.5 million from a single donor. His consultants are aware of it, but it's kept from the public. Is there anybody on the Republican side who would want to admit the system is broken? Instead they're complaining that they've been caught. I mean, first, the
1.5 million, that was actually to Wisconsin Club for
Correct.
Growth, not to his campaign directly.
Under the current rules, there's nothing wrong with someone giving money to a nonprofit.
What's a little perplexing is if this happened during the recall, they could have given it to Walker directly. And
During
it wouldn't
that
have
small
been for that
window.
window, and there wouldn't have been a limit.
I don't think Menards really wanted people to know about, that John Menard wanted people to know about this donation. So
That was during a lot of people were talking about boycotting Walker's supporters, and things were pretty heated back then, so maybe he didn't. But at the same time, there's still this question of the John Doe 2, and was there legal coordination? Was there, and that whole amount.
So you have that, plus you have the issue of Wisconsin Club for Growth being a nonprofit that's not supposed to be doing all politics all the time, but obviously they were doing a lot of politics. They spent millions of dollars in support of Scott Walker. So, there is the issue of disclosure, and then the second issue of coordination, as you pointed out.
A couple of other topics we wanted to cover, and we'll get to a few reader questions again before we end here in a few minutes. But we had a ruling, I guess there's no ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, but they let stand the ruling on the voter ID law here in Wisconsin. So not for this next election here in a few weeks in April, but for future elections. How does that change things? There's been all the complaints about it in the past, or is this just, we're going to be in this new world where you have the photo ID
I think,
going forward?
a lot of the complaints last time was about how quickly it was going into place. I haven't heard very many Democrats complaining about it this time. I mean, they're not happy with it, but they've got time to adjust and make changes. And in some other states where they've had voter ID, turnout among Democrats has actually risen. In Virginia, I believe it has. So I think this isn't as alarming. Obviously, Walker and the Republicans are happy that the Supreme Court didn't take this. I think the fact that they're going to have a lot of time, a year and a half, 2 years to prepare for this, makes it maybe not as dramatic as it might have appeared originally.
Because it could have been weeks before a presidential election the first time before, so I think I'm guessing a lot of people who will turn out for the April elections probably have IDs. I don't think it's going to be a huge voter turnout, but I could be wrong.
Okay, let's run through a couple reader questions. First, this is from David Paul, who's asking about the race for Wisconsin Democratic Party chair. Now, you were with Mike Tate a week ago on a different kind of chat, but he says, is there a front runner today? If so, who or why? Anything you've been picking up on who's likely to be the next chair?
I think Jason Ray, who's this 27, 28-year-old party activist, and even though he's only 27 or 28, he's been active in the party for a decade. He's probably the favorite. He works right now for the consulting firm Nation Consulting. He's built a lot of support. Joe Winnicky, who's held the position before, is running. And I think I said last week that there's sort of a been there, done that feel to him. But he does have the experience there. And there are a number of other people, but those would be
Yeah, and Mary Lang Solinger, who I think she put out her release that she was running on, I want to say it was budget day, so I got it while I had like a copy of the budget, so it probably did not get a lot of coverage. Just
And she's withdrawn now.
in timing.
She's
Oh,
not
yeah,
running.
that's right, that's right.
And she's thrown her support to another candidate.
That's
But I think Jason is the person to watch. You know, it's also an interesting thing because with Mike Tate, the party took a risk because he's a relatively young guy. Mike gave himself an incomplete grade for his time in office. I think most people would say that he was below average in how they turned out because they lost all 3 branches of state government. So do they want to do that again? Do they want to risk things with another young guy who's not run a party before, or do they want to, go back to the future and choose Joe Winnicke?
What's the real importance, I guess, for that position? Clearly within the party it's important, but can that help make a difference on the electoral map in the state, or is it so locked in with redistricting and things that's a tough road for Joe
Yeah,
or
but that's
Jason
still,
or
I mean,
whomever?
redistricting is part of the process itself. So sure, you're helping decide who the candidates are. Clearly, Mike liked Mary Burke and what's her name, who ran for Attorney General, Mary, how soon we forget? Susan Happ. Susan Happ. I mean, he wanted that at the top of the ticket. He can't endorse them, but I think he was happy with those 2 candidates, and they feel like they did about as well as they could. But yeah, I mean, you have an important role in terms of fundraising. You have an important role in terms of strategy and in terms of selecting candidates. It's a major position.
Didn't the Republican Party chair put out a statement when Mike Tate stepped down saying like it doesn't matter whose name is on the door, their failed policies are going to tank or something?
Right, whatever. but it's still yeah. I mean, it does. I think it does make a difference as to who it is. I mean, obviously, Joe Fadness is the executive director on the other side, and he's placed a lot of emphasis on opposition research. And I think right now, the Republicans are much more effective right now at doing opposition research. They had a lot of information on Mary Burke during the campaign and on some of the other candidates. So the priorities can change depending on who's in charge.
I throw in a question from a reader named Jeff who asks, do you believe there is any chance Scott Walker will not run for president? What would it take for Scott to get
I mean, it's
the
not,
governor to get out
it's
of the
not
race?
a certainty, but it's a near certainty. Yeah, what would it take? Some major blow up.
Yeah, it would take something I would think it would take something pretty catastrophic. I don't think just firing Liz Mayer is going to do it.
Not going to do it. Tom Cruise getting in the race.
That might do
that
it.
might shift the dynamics.
Katie Holmes, I don't know.
All right, well, we're
Is she
just
thinking about it? I hadn't heard that.
I made that up.
It could be a ticket.
Yeah,
I don't know if
exactly.
it is or isn't a ticket anymore. Time for one
George
last
Clooney.
question, and this is just predictions for you guys, not about politics, but Wisconsin versus North Carolina tonight, NCAA. Where's your money?
I'm really
Or
nervous
maybe
about
not
the
money.
game.
Where's your prediction?
Do you want to bet? You're a Marquette guy.
I'm a Marquette guy, so
I'm nervous about it, to tell you the truth. I thought going into the tournament that it's pretty certain they would make it to the Final Four. North Carolina is not as good as they've been in the past, but yeah, I'm
right. So
I'm not going to pick. I'll do like a Bob McGinn.
So you're going to do a little waffle here.
Right,
so,
that's
okay.
him again.
I think the Badgers were not looking that good for their last game, but I think they're going to get it together and win.
Okay.
So she'll say win, I'll say
Oh, you're going
win.
to say the
Win.
Badgers are going to lose?
I gotta be on
One
the
of
other
you guys
side.
will be the GOAT and one will be the hero. And I'll just be in the middle. As Dan said, I'm a Marquette
I'm
guy.
not going to root for them.
Right.
This is just, there's money involved here.
I can't say that I like Wisconsin, but I like them to win tonight because that's just, with the way my luck is going with Marquette basketball this year, they're bound to win and go and win the whole
And they
thing.
obviously have Trayvon Jackson back, and so I mean, there's a good case to be made. But the number of threes they're shooting is making me a little bit nervous too.
All right, so that's threes from the Badgers, not from Governor Walker. We'll see how everyone wound up next week when we're back at this usual time, location, internet channel. Thank you.